So today's video is on clubs being extended. So we're going to show you graphite and steel and how I would personally extend a golf club. Just going to mention that it's how I do the particular repair. So your PGA professional at a golf club may do it differently. And again, they would do it differently on tour to how I do it. Ideally, you'd buy a shaft at the correct length and then fit that. That's the way I'd recommend. But when somebody just wants an extension, then this is a quick, easy, efficient and cheapest way to do it. A lot of the time the customer will say, particularly where I work, can you do it as cheap as possible? It might be an old club that they want altering or changing. It might even be as simple as a grip, and they'll be like, Lester, I don't play a lot, I want a cheap grip. So I've had a few messages from the last video saying you should do this, that we do that, etc. And you're probably right. And if the price was no issue, then I would do things slightly differently. However, I do get asked how I do certain repairs, and this series of videos will just show you how I would take on a particular task. So today's video, we are doing extension of a graphite club and extension of a steel club. I am going to just mention that when you extend clubs or reduce the length and cut them down, you do change the lie angle. That obviously is more important when you're talking about irons, but woods, not so much the case. Swing weight as well is affected by reducing and increasing length of a golf club. Another point, if you're increasing length, which is what we're doing, you can make the club slightly more difficult to hit. Obviously you're further away from the club head. So we're not going to talk about the changes or how that affects the golf club. We're just going to show you in simple terms how we actually make the extensions and how we actually fit them. So I will start with the steel shaft, which is probably the most common extension that I do. So you can buy specialist extensions for the clubs which are already prepped. They tend to come double-ended. So what you would do is you would use one extension for two different clubs. You'd cut it to length. It's already made, it's already designed. They can cost anything between sort of £4 and £5 up to sort of £6 and £7 now. So what I tend to do is someone breaks a club, I will use the shaft. And what I will do with that is I'll remove the grip generally, and then I will cut a small piece of the shaft, which is obviously the top half. Obviously, don't put graphite shafts into a steel shaft. So the extension can't be graphite. That's a mistake I've seen people make in the past, but don't do that because it won't last. Graphite's very brittle as well, so when you actually pop that in there, if there's any movement, you might damage and break the actual fibers of the shaft, and then the actual graphite extension will split, break off and not be usable. So the first thing I do is just check that that shaft will actually fit down the shaft I'm extending. So I just pop that in there and see how far it runs, and you'll see that's gone in. I put my finger there a little bit too far. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to trim the extension and make it slightly smaller. I don't need that much shaft inside the club that I'm extending. So I've just put the shaft into my vise, tightened it, and then we need this little tool. That is basically a pipe cutter. You'll see plumbers will have this when they're cutting their pipes, probably some builders as well. It's available, they're sort of 40 or 50 pounds. It's not a cheap bit of equipment, but it's perfect for cutting steel shafts. So what I'm going to do now is just fasten that around the shaft, tighten it, not too tight, just get it going, so slowly turn. The issue you can have is if you tighten it too quickly, you'll crush the shaft. So I'm just turning the same direction and just slowly tightening it until the shaft actually breaks off. So I'd recommend that when extending it, I would want twice as much shaft inside the shaft I'm extending to what's coming out. So that would be a sort of 2 inches in, 1 inch out sort of scenario. So the next job is to actually roughen up the area that's going to go inside the shaft. And I do that with a file. So I'm just going to grab the edge of the file, slowly turn it round. And now you should see how that area now is no longer smooth, which is perfect for the glue to set to. And you should see now, if I show a close-up, how that it's slightly scratched, I think probably is the term. So now I've got my Aradite, which is the two-part stuff. I'm just gonna pop it on a bit of cardboard, like so, and then we're just gonna mix the glue. This is the slow drying Aradite. I find that long-term works better. And then I'm just gonna cover the area that I've roughened up. And then we just pop the shaft in there nice and tight. I'm gonna wipe off with an old towel, not my mum's best towel, to wipe the glue off. And then I'm just gonna carefully just tap it a couple of times down onto a hard surface, just to ram it down a little bit. You can hit it with, I've seen people get a hammer, pop something in the end of the shaft and hit it down as well, but I find it just works just as well by hitting into the actual stone floor. Although that's in there sort of nice and tight and I can't even pull it out, so that would probably be enough to stick it in. But I'm just going to do a couple of extra things to that just to make sure it's 100% secured and in place. So I've got a hammer and a small punch, and what I'm going to do, just literally below the joint, so in here, this sort of area, I'm going to actually make a couple of small indentations in the shaft. Apologies for the noise, but just be careful when you're doing this as well. You can always tell how skilled someone is where they hold the hammer. I am doing this and filming at the same time, so it's going to get one more little tap, not too much, but you should now better see. I don't know if that's showing up, hopefully it will. Where my finger is, there's just a small dent in there. That again helps the glue to set. I'll repeat that on the other side, and then we'll just stand that in an upright position and let it dry overnight. It takes sort of 6, 7, maybe 8 hours for that to set before we actually then cut it to length. So now we tackle graphite shafts. Okay, working with steel is a lot easier than graphite. Graphite is more temperamental as a material. You've got to be careful. Steel, you can be a little bit rougher, you can do certain things to steel which won't make any difference, but graphite, if you sort of break a fibre or damage the shaft, then they do snap. You've probably seen clubs snap in the past. It tends to be graphite is the main material that breaks. So whatever you do, do not extend that with steel. It does not work, it's not recommended, and I've seen people actually extend graphite with steel, and that's a no-no. So we have a couple of options here of what we can use to make an extension. So we've got an old graphite shaft which is broken. I've then cut it and saved the top portion again, or we can use some wood. Both of these are totally acceptable. I tend to use an old graphite shaft rather than wood, because wood, you have to actually do more work to it, and basically you have to sort of shave down or file away down at the bottom for that to actually go into the actual shaft. However, graphite, as long as you cut far enough down, should fit better into the actual original shaft that you're extending, and all you have to do really is then just prep it, which it takes a lot less time. So exactly the same method as what I did with the steel. I'm just going to grab the file and be very careful not to actually go up, because I will actually then sort of splinter it off. So just lightly file this and just remove the initial layer of paint. Working your way around, not taking too much off, because if you take too much off, all you're going to do is weaken the very end of the shaft. You'll see now the graphite will start to appear once I've stripped the paint off, and that will probably be enough preparation. So I grab the shaft I'm extending and just pop the graphite inside. Again, working on the theory of twice as much in as what you want out. So we're going for 2 inches in, which, you know, that's more or less where I'd want it to be. So we've repeated the process of adding the glue. This time I wouldn't recommend necessarily hitting it down. You're just going to slowly sort of push that into place, making sure it's nice and tight in there, that's a very good fit. Just give it a couple of bends as well. Graphite has got not only got flex, it's got torque in there as well, so just give it a little bend just to make sure that that's firmly in place. At this stage as well, it's important to say the process I did with the steel where I punched a hole in it, do not do that with graphite. You will just literally crack the shaft, break it. So that process you only do for steel. I've popped the 2 shafts in the corner drying, so we'll come back tomorrow and we will cut them to length. So if we start first with graphite, I just checked that that's nicely secured in place, and it is. You can see where the actual join is, where the new shaft has gone into the top of the old shaft. And what I'm going to do is just going to get a bit of the grip tape, like so, and then I'm just going to place it round the area of the shaft which I'm going to cut. As I've said a few times, graphite is quite brittle, it breaks. You have basically fibres of graphite that are joined together to make in the shaft. So we're going to use the hacksaw to now cut through that. And that bit of tape, what will that do is it will make, when I cut through, it will make the break cleaner, and hopefully that should prevent the shaft from actually cracking or splintering. So I pop the shaft into the vise with the sort of the rubber plastic holder, just to again protect the shaft. And what we do is we've got the hacksaw, and I'm just going to start sawing. What I do as well is I want to rotate that shaft around, so, just to make sure that we have it nice and straight, trying to keep that saw as well nice and sort of parallel to the actual shaft. We want to try and make that cut nice and straight. And then when we finish, we remove the shaft, and then what we do is we just take off the tape, and then you'll notice there's not any graphite splinters or anything like that. We've got about the inch that's coming out the top of the shaft, like so. And here's the steel shaft. You'll notice a couple of the hole punches either side towards the top of the original shaft, and the join there where the shaft has been glued together. We don't need to use any tape for steel. It will just literally be the pipe cutters in position and then them rotated. Again, the shaft into the vise, loosen the shaft cutters, the pipe cutters, tighten them slightly, and then start to turn. And then all we do is you just increase the pressure by tightening them and turning, and then a couple more turns. You should now start to make a bit of an indentation in the shaft. It should now start to cut. You can actually hear that now. If you tighten too quickly, then you will tend to crush the shaft. One noticeable difference, you should just be able to see that, is the graphite shafted extension doesn't quite match in or marry in with the original grip, whereas the steel, that is quite a tight finish. So what I need to do here is I need to build up around the extension, making it the same width as the original shaft. Once I've done that, we will just literally tape over the top and then pop the grip over the top. But you need to make sure, the key point is the fact that the shaft now at the top is the same width as the original shaft, because if not, you'll get a different feel. The top will feel thin, it might even move, because grips tend to move from the top rather than the bottom. So it needs to be padded out and packed out so that you don't have a nice smooth finish. Thanks for watching the video, I hope you enjoyed it. Please like the video, comment below, all comments answered, and please subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching.